Vitamin B12 is produced by certain bacteria and archaea, which are found primarily in the guts of cows and other ruminants. Unlike humans, who have to obtain vitamin B12 from animal-based foods or supplements, these animals absorb B12 from the bacteria in their digestive tract, and store it in their liver and other tissues. Animals contain so much vitamin B12 in their tissues because they have a specialized microbial fermentation processing system for synthesizing, absorbing and storing the B12. Therefore, as animals eat more plant-based foods, they accumulate more B12 in their tissues because they constantly absorb and store B12 from the bacteria in their gut. Additionally, animals can absorb B12 from other sources, such as soil, water, or the feces of other animals, which can contribute to their B12 levels. So, while plants contain only small amounts of B12, animals that consume them can accumulate and store much higher levels of vitamin B12 in their tissues through their specialized digestive system. Furthermore, while some plant-based foods may contain traces of B12, they do not have the active form of B12, methylcobalamin, that animals produce and humans require. As a result, people who follow a vegetarian or vegan diet are at a higher risk of developing B12 deficiency, and may need to supplement their diet with active forms of B12, such as methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. The term phytocobalamins refers to compounds found in some plant-based foods, structurally similar to vitamin B12, but not the form of B12 required by humans. These phytocobalamin compounds have low biological activity compared to the cobalamin forms of B12. As a result, they are not readily absorbed by the body. While some plant-based foods may contain compounds that resemble B12, they are simply not a reliable source of vitamin B12 for humans. Intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein produced by the stomach's parietal cells. It is essential for absorbing vitamin B12 in the body. Intrinsic factor binds to vitamin B12 and protects it from degradation in the stomach's acidic environment. This allows the B12 intrinsic factor complex to travel to the distal portion of the small intestine, the ileum, for absorption into the bloodstream. However, in terms of binding capabilities, intrinsic factor does not distinguish between animal and plant-based vitamin B12. Both animal and plant-based B12 can equally reach the ileum where B12 is absorbed. Again, the inactive B12 analogues found in some plant-based foods have much lower biological activity than the active forms of B12, and are not readily utilized by the body. This means that even if phytocobalamins are bound to intrinsic factor, and absorbed into the bloodstream, they are not suitable to meet the body's B12 needs. Here are a couple of studies showing that intrinsic factor cannot distinguish between active and inactive forms of vitamin B12, and that both can be bound to intrinsic factor and absorbed into the bloodstream. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 1999 compared the absorption of vitamin B12 from milk and a soy-based formula containing a B12 analog called pseudovitamin B12. The study found that both forms of B12 were bound to intrinsic factor and were absorbed similarly into the bloodstream. However, the pseudovitamin B12 was much less effective in correcting a B12 deficiency in rats. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2010 compared the absorption of cyanocobalamin and hydroxocobalamin forms of B12 with the absorption of a B12 analog called cobinamide dicyanide in healthy human subjects. The study found that all three forms of B12 were able to bind to intrinsic factor and were equally absorbed into the bloodstream. Still, the analog was much less effective in increasing B12 levels in the body. These studies suggest that intrinsic factor cannot distinguish between different sources or forms of vitamin B12, and that they can be absorbed into the body. However, the biological activity of the inactive analogues are much lower than that of the active forms, which can lead to deficiencies in individuals who rely on plant-based sources of B12. In conclusion, it's vital for individuals following a vegan or vegetarian diet to supplement their diet with active forms of B12, such as methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. Thanks for watching.